Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com program, brought to you by Techstrong and Plutora. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting presentation ahead. First, I do need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, maybe you'd like to watch later or share with a friend. The on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, we want you to send those in to the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. And for all other conversations and discourse, we want you to take that to the chat tab. Let us know from where you're tuning in or your thoughts throughout today's program. We do also have a couple polls that we'll be launching throughout today's webinar, so we want your participation there. And we do have a copy of the slides available for download under the Handouts tab. So feel free to grab a copy of those at your own leisure. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So the topic of our program today is overcoming release management transformation challenges. And I'm joined by Marc Hornbeek, CEO of Engineering DevOps Consulting, Richard Winslow, Director of Solutions Architecture at Plutora, and Bob Davis, CMO of Plutora. So Marc, Richard, Bob, thank you all so much for joining me today. Bob, do you want to go ahead and get this conversation kicked off?
You bet, Cody, and thank you very much for the intro. And I'll offer my own hello to everyone that's joined us today, and I'll resist the temptation to start by saying a funny thing happened to me on the way to the webinar. It was quite a journey to get to this spot. But we're excited to have you join us. And this topic is one that is actually kind of near and dear to my heart. I got an email just a couple days ago from someone who was researching release management and said that we were a spot on the internet, the Plutora website, where he found a bunch of information on release management and was happy about that because he said the information is very difficult to find. Release management seems to get the short end of the stick in many discussions as people want to talk about fancier transformations. But in our experience, the release managers are right in the middle of the quagmire of transformation. And in fact, many roads to digital transformation go through the release manager, and their jobs are changing. The organizations they're living in are changing, and their world is very difficult. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the challenges that release managers and release management itself has with respect to making transformations of their software delivery process and factory. What's going on that creates these challenges, why they exist. Understanding that gives you some sense, some ideas, some hints on how to solve it once you know how it happens. And then we'll apply that kind of knowledge and look at how we might overcome those hurdles. But the centerpiece of this, and I'm super excited about it, is we're going to be doing a demonstration. Rich has joined us today. We're happy about that. He's a master on the Plutora platform, and we're going to take a dive into what the platform can do to actually make what we're talking about come to life. The question that people ask, how do I get started? What's the right way to get started? Advice comes back, start slow. But what does that exactly mean? We're going to offer an example of exactly what that means, how you can start with a small piece, but get big value and then set yourself on a page to be able to move and get continually increasing value as you are ready to absorb it. The changes can be hard to do. We find that doing it too fast can be a real problem. And the temptation is there because the release managers are under a tremendous amount of pressure. Their job is to guide the software to the customer, but they're inundated with requests. They're responsible for keeping the teams collaborating. They're responsible for moving the product not only through a pipeline, but bringing in external services like security or an architectural review board. That's their job. And so often they don't have visibility to be able to see what's actually happening. And that's one of the things that we're going to explore. How do you become a data-driven release manager so you can be better prepared to guide that software with fewer defects, much less risk, and more features. The promise that you have as release managers, and we have a number of them on the call today, the promise that you have with release managers is if you get control of that environment, you'll be able to generate significantly more value to your customer by delivering more capability, more features, more user stories, if you will, to those customers without having to thrash your production anymore. You're just going to get more efficient and better at delivering that to production. And that's what we're going to be trying to get to, is that kind of a goal. But there's work to be done to get there. The transformation is messy, and we've asked Marc Hornbeek, who speaks to clients all over the world, just got back from a trip to Toronto where he was talking about many of these same things and sees folks struggle with this all the time. So we've asked Marc to come in and give us some thoughts on what he's actually seeing as these release managers transform, what challenges they have. Why is it so hard? Marc, why don't you start there?
Sure. Again, thanks for having me for this webinar. Yeah, so I mean, the challenges of transforming to modern release management are similar to the challenges of transforming to DevOps and SRE and all of that. Release management really heavily depends on having data-driven decisions, as Bob said, and even traditional release management has, to a large extent, been a problem of managing data. But with these more modern, continuous systems, there's a lot more to manage, and more rapidly and more in parallel. Traditional release management bases release promotion decisions on outputs of sequential stages of the different parts of the the pipeline, and the problem is the outputs from later stages can indicate prior stages are unstable or unsuitable for the release, and the whole process has to restart, causing delays and frustrations. But modern continuous release management, if you like, is based on the shift left strategies of DevOps and SRE practices, and requires keeping up with a lot of data streams and multiple value streams across the a whole service. And to do that, you really have to have technology to help you guide and gather the the information in a continuous basis. But if you do that, then you get a lot of benefits: agility, stability, efficiency, quality, security, satisfaction, reliability. All of those things are very real if you do it right, but can be very difficult to accomplish if you don't have the data available at your fingertips.
I had some kind of a glitch and I lost Marc's audio. So we're going to go ahead and do this survey before we get started to kind of see where we are as an audience, where you think you might be, how you would describe your state. Are you thinking about getting started, or maybe you haven't quite started? Are you fully implemented and getting excellent results, or somewhere in between? Maybe you've implemented a little bit, but you haven't gotten the results that you expected. Why don't you fill this out and we'll see what kind of responses you get. What would you expect to see, Marc?
Well, given the audience in this webinar and the people that would probably attend, I would think probably the middle range, implement release management benefits, but somewhat less than expected. A lot of enterprises are kind of stuck in the middle a little bit, which we're going to talk about in the later slides. So they're getting good benefits with some value streams, but not others. So I'm guessing number 3 is going to be the most popular answer.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think so for sure. And we might be able to get those results popping up here soon. There we go. So a lot of people that haven't really gotten started.
Oh, interesting.
Looks like very few are getting excellent benefits. So that's interesting. That's really super interesting. Okay, well, we'll keep that in mind, Marc, as we go through. My guess is that some of the reasons why we're not seeing as much benefit there has everything to do with the problems we're going to be discussing. So that's for sure. And one of the other things is a lot, you're not alone, right, Marc? I mean, this is a 2021 report. You've seen some more recent ones, but the data is pretty similar. Isn't that right?
Yeah, like you said, the State of DevOps 2021 indicated a lot of organizations are kind of getting stuck in the middle. And like you say, if that's your situation, you're not alone. But if you're just getting started, it's a good thing to be aware of, so that you have an opportunity to prepare for not getting stuck, if you like. Certainly, like getting to a middle level of DevOps proficiency, and along with that, release management, you can be achieved relatively easy by just implementing kind of the basics of CI/CD, the middle part of the value stream. But really moving to higher performance requires more of an end-to-end view across the whole value stream and a well-coordinated strategy to achieve it. Requires more of a deep understanding of the different dimensions, people, process, and technology bottlenecks, and investing in solutions to address all of those bottlenecks, accelerating flow, getting visibility of the current state, and clarifying your goals, and then moving in the direction of improvement incrementally.
Yeah, I think
never give up.
Yeah, never give up. I think, you mentioned the key word of visibility, and I love this slide because we find this all the time, that people are in silos. Would you say this is more common than not, Mark?
Yes, a lot of organizations struggle. I mean, they'll get visibility on one individual pipeline or value stream, but getting a coordinated view across their whole, service is more challenging because it requires coordination of data and sort of a constant or a common, source of truth. So release managers need to have that overview, and getting that overview requires, technology, people, the processes to gather it together to get that clear-eyed visibility on enterprise-wide sort of value streams with a common source of truth and appropriate metrics for all the different parts of the value stream. The webinar we did actually last month, I think it was, focusing on metrics, I think would help a lot in this particular regard as well.
Yeah, I agree. We've talked about this a lot, that wherever there is a handoff, so an individual team, a handful of folks doing a particular part of the process, working together, communicates just fine. But the minute they have to hand off something or seek an input from outside of their world, they're going to be waiting for something, and the efficiency of that handoff is part and parcel to their ability to get the job done. And I think, the issues show up in many different spots, right? In that release management landscape. These are some interesting ones. We chatted about it we put it in the abstract for the webinar to talk about why release management issues get in the way of some of these other initiatives, DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE issues. Why don't you shed some light there? It's not super obvious.
Yeah, so certainly the most recent 2022 State of the DevOps report sort of confirms that enterprises are getting kind of stuck, and there's the various theories and reasons for this. Potentially, I have my own based on my own experiences, but fundamentally, it reports DevOps a lot of fatigue, dev teams getting tired and not figuring out how to move forward. 2/3 of those surveyed were falling in the middle cluster of performance, and the percent achieving high performance actually is reduced. So there's a lot of kind of fatigue going on there, and I have my own theories about why that is, and we're going to talk about some of those based on my own experience. And DevSecOps option adoption is also lagging. A lot of high burnout, especially the security folks are busy, commonly being reported, and then SRE transformation which often go hand in hand, or at least couple well with DevOps. They're not really showing the effect on improved reliability that they want initially. It generally requires some level of adoption and evolution before you get to those performance levels. So I think generally speaking though, the teams that are really committed to continuously improving tend to have higher performance, and those are the ones that tend to break through better. That's my own opinion, and it seems to be echoed in that report as well. The real question is why are the transformations getting stuck? What can be done about it? And that's what we're going to be talking about, at least some opinions about that.
Yeah. Why don't we dive into that, Mark?
Yeah. So fundamentally, this chart sort of says what are the key, if you like, areas where things get stuck. Every transformation typically, involves a journey with changes required for a combination of the people, the processes, the technologies involved. And to be successful, all of those three dimensions together journey and have to journey in balance through the different phases of transformation, visions, setting up goals, creating and deploying the solutions, followed by, operating and expanding a solution, and finally improving and sustaining the solution. So things can get stuck in any one of those dimensions or any one of those phases. So it's not surprising when you consider the potential complexities of that things can go astray or get stuck. So that really does require kind of a strategic approach to make sure you stay on track and have a journey that is mostly going forward rather than backwards or sideways.
Yeah. It's interesting, when Plutora started, and I've been there almost 6 years now, the DevOps was a little less entrenched, and we kind of considered ourselves a flight deck for release managers' manual processes. Everything was manual, a lot of meetings, and there was a lot of things. And the Plutora platform originally was designed to be able to essentially automate those manual processes, simplifying those handoffs, removing spreadsheets from the day-to-day management of releases, and actually building that into a SaaS platform with dashboards and templates and a variety of things that you'll see that allow people to maneuver through it. As DevOps came, certain parts of the organization would clamor to move forward on the advanced technology ahead of others. So now you had all these different levels of maturity that were still being managed by the release manager. So going through these four basic steps, trying to have that responsibility of guiding something through there with these all changing at different spots, not only the technology, as I mentioned, but the processes that are behind that, the tools they're using, and the skill levels and knowledge of the people. All three of these changing at once, it's just a nightmare. And I'm excited to hear, Marc, your comments as we talk about some of the specific cases. Let's talk about people first. What are your thoughts here?
So all of these areas, I think it's best to maintain kind of a strategic, thread through your transformation process. But when it comes to transformation, definitely the people challenges tend to be the most difficult ones to overcome. I mean, after all, once people are engaged around a clear transformation strategy, then those actions, tend to intensify in the right direction. But if not, then progress is going to be slow at best. The most prevalent people type challenges that I do see, and I'm kind of surprised that I continue to see this because it seems almost obvious, right? The ones that indicated in bold. I mean, lack of having an executive sponsor for the transformation, because you need somebody to, budget it and help support it and stick handle the politics of the organization and so on around the transformation. If you don't have a big picture strategy that's articulated with a clear vision and an approach, it's very common, unfortunately, to see organizations do these transformations without that. And it's not surprising to me that those involved get confused and they don't even know in detail what the goals are sufficiently. Even when you have the strategy, siloed cultures, poor communication between the different team members can be a major impediment to the transformation. And other challenges in the category of what I say people, affecting the transformation are unrealistic expectations, lack of collaboration, resource shortages, skill gaps, developer overload, lack of roles, clarity, and misunderstanding. One thing that I find often is interesting is misunderstanding the cause-effect relationship between team performance and the success of the transformations. Usually good teams will find a way if they're incentivized properly with the right direction.
Yeah, one of the other things that we're involved with at Plutora is with the Value Stream Management Consortium. And the Value Stream Management Consortium has looked at this problem and just published their state of the market. And it was really interesting that without question, the number one issue with getting organizations over the line of transformation is that executive level sponsorship. Somebody that says they understand the long game of what it means to transform, and we're going to sponsor this across the organization. That insightful, shepherding of the process from an executive is what is really the difference. Because once you have that, a lot of these things that are below that line, they fall in line when that executive sponsorship, the teams will organize better. They'll start to be much more collaborative and so forth and so on. So that's so huge. Now, Marc, we ran that in like I said, in the consortium survey. Do you find that to be the case as frequently? Like 70% of the time, I think that is the issue that came up.
Absolutely. I mean, I've many times been partway through transformation project and the executive sponsor changes and then a new one comes along with different strategies and goals. Both of them were fine, but the fact that it was different caused the whole transformation to stall.
Yeah.
And there's a hiatus there where things just didn't really get going again for a while. So
Yeah.
this is absolutely a key one, right? You want to have that executive sponsor, not just existing, but really actively involved in promoting the strategy and the vision, and not just say, hey, this is what we're going to do, but actually have clear documentation of what the major strategic goals are, articulating current state from potential future, intended future state, and roughly the tactics and strategies to get from here to there, in at least big picture terms. That should be a document available to everybody that they can refer to and leverage from, for sure.
Right, and spoiler alert on when we get to the demonstration, that's the beauty of starting small in an area where you can start small and get to some successful points in your transformation quickly, so that you can show value and give people the optimism that they need, get momentum behind the project. That kind of momentum will help to generate empathy and will start to build that executive sponsor layer if it's not already there. So that's a key part of what we'll be able to show you in the demonstration, is not just starting small, but starting small somewhere where you can add value and demonstrate value quickly. Let's move on to processes, Mark. What are your thoughts here?
Well, processes, I think, are kind of the next in importance. I mean, you really need to evolve all of these things to some extent in parallel and in a balanced way, like I say, but I would categorize process-related challenges kind of just behind the people challenges in priority, but ahead of technology in some ways, because so many organizations push ahead with technology change without first understanding what the processes need to be. And, those processes should drive the technology change priorities. So a common problem is focusing on process improvements for very short term and getting, maybe some tactical gains, but then sacrificing the longer term strategic priorities that yield long-term products or service benefits. So, for example, over focusing on, let's say, CI without seeing where you're going with it, right? And the kind of metrics you're going to need to pull out at the total value stream level later. So, putting in place systems and processes are going to serve your big picture as you get there. Otherwise, you'll get kind of stuck with your own improvements as you go along. So similarly, automating processes that don't connect siloed activities effectively. You might have processes that connect your product or platform specific things, but as you get bigger and you want to get through to bigger levels of performance, you're going to want to connect the bigger pictures of things together. So it's really critical to understand the current state of your value streams, install something that's sufficient and reliable and capable enough to support the whole set of value streams in the enterprise. That requires some strategic thinking at the process level as well.
I think, it's one of the things that I bet you, Rich, when you're working with a proof of concept or an initial implementation, sitting down and saying, hey, we're going to implement this part of your software delivery lifecycle, and, looking at it at Plutora, and they're like, well, we're not really quite sure what the process is. Very difficult to implement a digital transformation, any tool or platform, if you don't understand what you want the process to be when it's done. And I think, Rich, would you agree that that's something that you see very often in your implementations?
Yeah, well, the successful implementations are those, driven by an individual who has that vision for the end game, and as well as understands the current process, because you don't have to wait for the future state. You can start now and continuously improve. And I'll spend some time on that in the demo. But yeah, if you don't have a vision for how this is supposed to look, you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
And taking the first bite with that vision, I think, is a good place to start.
Yeah, and that high level understanding is key, because very often, the delivery of software to a customer is going to pass through multiple different teams. No, these dependencies are not just one pipeline. These dependencies are across multiple pipelines. You might be making a change in an application that requires a database change in the back end. And if that happens to be a bank, that's going to have some very highly secure hoops you're going to have to jump through. And that coordinating that can be just very, very difficult. And if those processes are both evolving because we're all transforming, now you're connecting the dots between moving parts, and so not having that clear vision of where you want it to go, and again, the people support, and then a clear view of how you want those processes to come alive in your transformation. I think that's a super important point. And of course, we often think of technology and only technology. We saved it till the end. This obviously is also causes some problems, Marc, right?
Yeah, well, this is where I get somewhat annoyed sometimes when I'm starting with a new client. Everybody wants to talk about their favorite tech to start with rather than the bigger problems. And then I have to bring them back around to say, yeah, I mean, the technology choices should be driven by your strategy, not kind of the other way around. But that's not to say that technology choices, aren't really critical and should be part of the strategy from the get-go, right? Definitely choose technologies that have a broad capability, rather than worrying about point problems. Figuring out how things are going to fit together in the long run is really where I think people should think about at the beginning of their transformation, and then it's going to make it a lot easier as they build it out. Start integrating other tools together and start using it with the different processes. If you have a capability platform that has the breadth of the capability you need for orchestration, automation, and getting the data and analysis, all of the different processes across the value streams need that at every stage. So, what I see too often is they start off with too many tools, too many silos, and they try to stitch them all together rather than saying, wait a minute, what's the big picture going to look like? How are we going to tie all this together? And, start with building the right platform is usually a good place to start, rather than worrying about stitching together the existing tools. And maybe you want to even consolidate tools. There's too many variations. At the same time, you find out that despite the variations, there's gaps in the different tech stacks. So you want to decide what are the priorities to fill in depending on, where you are in your transformation. Don't try to build it all at once. Figure out what your highest priorities are, where you're going to get the biggest gains, and then, start filling it in from there once you've got a solid platform.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, as we went through the transformation as a vendor, as Plutora went through the transformation from the flight deck above manual processes to now sitting above a lot of very automated processes and manual processes, that whole scenario, we saw a real proliferation of tools. And, there's folks that not only have multiple enterprise agile planning tools, but even multiple implementations of a given enterprise agile planning tool, and that can be said of any tool along the tool chain. So this can get to be a very complicated issue, and solving it is critical. We often in the advice that I've read and in various sources, getting the processes right, and then it says and connect the tools of the tool chain. And it moves on as if that's a really simple thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do, and to do it right with the people, the process, and technology challenges we have. So if you're going to start in a smaller area where your tool set is something you have line of sight to, that you can start to manage and show the value of connecting those dots early, and you'll have people clamoring to connect their parts of the tool chain, and the momentum will build, and off you go. And that's, again, a little spoiler alert on where we're going to be heading with the demo. We're going to move to a survey now. Given that we've talked about people and process and challenges, what are your biggest challenges? There were folks that said, there was a pretty good percentage, about 43% or so, that said that they had implemented some release management transformation, but had not yet really seen the benefits they were expecting. And so my question then is, well, which of the three things we've been talking about? Is it the lack of a sponsor? Is it, not understanding where all the processes are, how they're going to come together, and how they might want to change? selecting and evolving your technology choices? Which is it? What do you think it would be, Mark? Do you think would be the number one issue?
Well, I think I already gave my vote. From my own experience, it's always the people side that's the hardest part. The technology and the processes are, generally speaking, relatively easy once you get past the people challenges. But I'll be curious to see what other people say. I think it sometimes depends on where you are in the organization as well, which one you'd find most critical.
Okay, so it's people and process is what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interestingly, not a lot of challenge on the technology side. Fascinating. Very good. Well, some of those process challenges might give way to technology questions.
Well, I think that's just in terms of the order and the way the question was written. All of them have to be evolved in balance, but yeah, it's probably the right order.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you have some. This is a classic Marc Hornbeek approach, multiple step transformation. What are you saying here, Mark?
I use this simple diagram and approach for transforming all kinds of things, and it certainly applies to release management transformation as well. It's pretty much just a logical view of using the people, process, and technology, and continuous improvement concept. But start with visioning. Make sure you've got what is your vision, what is your strategy. Get the teams aligned around that, and assess your current state. Don't assume you know what it is, because it's always surprising when people think they know what it is, and then we go through an assessment and you find out, wait a minute, not really the way we are. And then you can figure out what your solution should be based on where you are now and what your goals are. Realize an MVP, trial it, get some input, do a model, like you said. Don't try to boil the ocean, build a model or two, and then use that model to operationalize it. And once you've got something that can be sustained, then expand it to other applications, rather than trying to evolve many value streams all in parallel. I think that approach tends to work better in the long run. You tend to have more steps forward than back if you follow this kind of logical 7-step process and do it kind of one model or application at a time.
Yeah, I this is I would think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I would think, if I was a release manager, I would take these 7 steps, certainly the 6 steps, and I would apply them to a project that I had the ability to manage and see to the end. I wouldn't pick a project that required me to convince somebody, a development center across, in another part of the world, where it's more difficult to communicate and to get that working. I'd get it working in a more controlled environment, if you will, so I can actually start to see that. I can't emphasize that enough. I just think that and then that expansion is, how do I take it to the next group? How do I take it to the next level of functionality? Is that what you're saying here, Mark? Is that really where you're coming from on this?
Yeah, once you have a model that everybody can relate to and see the benefits of, then it's going to be a lot easier to get other folks to adopt something similar to the model. It may not be exactly the same for every value stream, but the model will give you some guidance more than just, let's say, some documents or something. It'll give you real data that everybody can relate to. And I use the word model rather than MVP because you want everybody to be a share in the results. It's not just some group did an MVP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of summarizes kind of the advice. So maybe just kind of, there's a lot of words there, Mark. What are you saying on each of these boxes?
Well, yeah, there's elements needed to overcome these transformation challenges are pretty much just the flip side of what the challenges are, right? And so, it illustrates the main elements, starting with the people, make sure you have a sponsor, communicate the strategy, build a roadmap that makes sense, it's logical and not, too disruptive at the same time, clarify the roles, incentivize folks to, get on board with it, upskill where you need to, reward people and learn from failures, because there's definitely going to be failures as you go along. But learning from failures is critical. And then the people process side, I should say, really invest in orchestration and automation. That's going to also require some upskilling, observability, sustainability. Don't just stop by having something that kind of works, but make sure you've got processes that are going to continue to work and they're going to be reliable and dependable. Establish SLOs and SLIs, metrics for the release train itself, the best practice, frankly, is to set up the release capability as a service rather than just a set of tools. Make it available as a service that the release managers and everybody else can log into as a portal and use. Reassess the current state periodically, learn and improve incrementally. And technology, I always say start from choosing a comprehensive platform rather than trying to retool something that wasn't designed for that. So something that has the capability for integration, orchestration, automation, and analysis all built into it, sufficient to have the broad capability to look over many value streams. You don't have to use it for that to start with, even for the model, but you can begin with the model and then build it out, in more horizontal fashion once you have it. So it should be also offered as a service. Be able to, be easy to get going with, start, maintain, grow, transform as you add many more value streams. So I think that's what we're going to see in your demo, right? I mean, Plutora's value stream management platform was very much designed with this in mind. And this is why I'm always excited to participate in your webinars, because I know the capabilities you guys have are amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, and we're going to be shifting over to the demo, and Rich is going to be taking over. And before he does, I just want to point one thing out that I think is super cool. Is if you think about the overall software delivery lifecycle, for the overall value stream from idea to cash, covers a lot of ground. And this value cycle kind of shows with, kind of all your data, your stuff in the middle, where it can touch. So that would be the whole platform. We're going to really be focused on just a subset of it. And what's really cool is we're going to be making this instance that Rich is demonstrating today available as a free trial to anybody that wants to come to our website and give it a look, to log into the instance and actually give it a shot. We're going to call this a quick start, and it's for release management. And it's a great way to start slowly, to look at this overall thing and say, where can I start and show value? And Rich, I probably stole a little bit of your thunder. I apologize for that, but I'm going to pass it on over to you and let you do the demo.
All right. Thanks, Bob. And this is a continuous cycle. So I'm going to touch on how we recommend you getting started. We've been doing this for 10 years. I've been here for 5. There's a very logical progression of how you bring and upscale your release management practice. It's really going to start here with your portfolio planning and backlog, understanding what your releases and scope is. And then this is a whole governance process from soup to nuts. I like starting here and doing a light pieces here, and then expanding. And that's what my demonstration is going to go over. So I am going to share my screen. And that should be coming through. And I believe you should have a expand option, maybe in the upper right. Some of these screens are pretty detailed. And here we go. So this is Plutora. As Bob mentioned, we are offering this up. It's like, how do you get your hands on Plutora? We'll spin up an instance with, I think, relevant data. You can add, delete, change, but the system's all up and running. Showcasing, this first step in up-leveling your release management practices. For the demo, I'm going to tease you with some of the outcomes first. Then I will shift a little into how did we pull that off, and then close with some more outcomes. So what you're looking at here is Plutora. A few things you'll notice. We are a software as a service. We're hosted up in the cloud around the globe, so pick your region. There's no servers for you to manage and, troubleshoot and size. So this thing is going to come right up and you'll have access to it. Some of the favorite dashboards, there's different personas who are involved with release management. One of them is that management layer and executive layer. How do you get information to decision makers that's fast and accurate and comprehensive, so you can make good, fast decisions and predict problems and resolve them? So one of them, this is our release management KPI. So I'm trending over time. It's like, what do you need to know as a leader Because and there's two aspects. One is I want a clean release going out, but at the same time, I need to constantly be improving. So this is an example of a dashboard showing how many releases am I doing, per month, trended over time by type. What are those types? Most of my, hey, I got 75% agile, but I'm still doing some major and minor waterfall releases. What teams are delivering, and what's the risk profile of these different releases. Understanding where you're spending time by release type. This is always a good one, really understanding where you're investing. What's your work item throughput per month? Ideally in a DevOps culture, you should be delivering more capabilities every month as you fine tune your processes and get the teams working together cleanly. And we can look at this by value stream, so we can compare different value streams, how the different teams are performing, look for high performers, look for people who are challenged. And this is a future step for you, but we can even, bring in incidents from production and then correlate them back. Another kind of view of such metrics, and again, kind of talking about the outcomes here is, especially those involved with the digital transformation is, these are the famous 4 the DORA metrics, from the state of DevOps, the likes of Gene Kim. And, if you focused on, any metrics, focus on these 4 and drive them to improvement. Now you want to be doing more deployments per month. Okay. More smaller deployments lead to more refined, understanding of change, and so you can respond to it. Certainly your lead time for changes. How many user stories are you delivering per month by team? And by the way, this is coming because of an integration, which I'll show you in a minute, to a agile planning tool and using Plutora. Now, I'll give you a little insight as on these other 2. This typically does require a second phase integration. Again, I want to start with the agile planning integration, but integration to a ITSM tool. ITSM tool is typically understanding what the incidents are in production and how long there was an outage and bringing that in. I wouldn't bite that off to begin with, but that's probably the second bite. But we can get you up and running with this first bite on agile planning pretty quick. So let me kind of switch personas kind of from that leadership view. And by the way, all those you can subscribe to, get automatic emails, so you're not cobbling together reports for management. They're just going to flow. This really kind of helps boil down to what, a healthy, mature release management practice is. Is our insights dashboard. What each one of these rows is a release. You could call it a pipeline, a project. It really doesn't matter what term you use, but it's really important to have a single pane of glass, ultimately of all your teams and all your tools and all your different processes, and understand what's going on. So, like as we've talked about, pick a team. And start with the first step of release management, which the Quick Start bundle supports. And what we do is we set up templates, and there's templates out of the box here for you to, just to try out. And we're basically modeling your best practice for your SDLC or your value stream. So here's a claims team, and they're kind of on a monthly cadence where they have a dev phase, a sit phase, a UAT phase, and a staging phase. Okay, and these are the templates. In a release management practice, managing your SDLC there's certain things you need to do to achieve that quality outcome. So capture those as part of the template. Okay, assign those to a person or team with a relative due date. This is now going to all start to be automated. And I really want to caution you that this is not meant to be heavyweight, not meant to be lightweight. It's meant to be your best practice. At the end of your release, have that, that Zoom meeting and, delete the activities that added no value, add the ones that really you need to manage better. And that's part of your continuous improvement. Okay. So, and, this is kind of an agile team here. I've got a faster DevOps team here. They're doing 3 sprints extra hard into production. So I don't care if you're agile or waterfall or CI/CD, we capture that as templates. And let me show you those templates. Those templates look like this. This comes out of the box, a major, minor, emergency release template, just as examples. And what you can probably figure is we're going to leverage these templates because your agile planning tool, and our offer out of the box here is a native plugin to Jira. So here is my Jira instance, and I've got a payments project. It has fixed versions. And so the dev team and the product teams, the Scrum teams, they're living over here. Other parts of the organization need this front-end information. So in this 22.12 minor release has one user story to update the website for Christmas. It's just as my example here. We don't want any duplicate data entry. We're going to go and grab that minor, I think I said minor release template. Let's just double check. Yep, 21.12 minor. I'm going to grab this minor release template. We automatically duplicate it, phase shift it, and boom, I've started my next value stream. So if I go ahead and do a little filter on payments, you will see that, no work was done. The automation brings this across automatically. Here's my payment release. I'm going to capture what applications are changing that came from Jira, and I'm going to understand, hey, there's my user story, and we'll keep these synced. So no going into multiple projects and exporting data and going to another tool and exporting data and then trying to cobble together a spreadsheet with pivot tables. We want to get this into our common data model. And so that's how we start the value stream. So if I come back to my insights dashboard, which was right here, this we'll plug into the side of Jira and boom, this lights up for the teams that you're starting with. So let me show you a little bit more here. Okay, so we got this portal project, okay? I can understand what applications are changing. I can understand things like, all of the phases, the gates, the activity and criteria, and we have a notification engine built in. So if your first step in your release is to have a project kickoff meeting to get the team on the same page, great. Assign that to a person with a relative due date. They will get an email, for instance, or a Slack message or a Teams channel message through our notification wizard, all automated collaboration. So here it's like, hey, I got a release activity due. You get to formulate, hey, with 3 days before I want to send an email, formulate a template with variables, target that to the right people, and this starts to flow automatically. If you're a startup with 3 developers, you probably keep some stuff in your head. But as you start growing your team, there's too many apps in flight, too many stories, too many test cases, etc. And so we have a built-in notification engine to manage these activities. We'll bubble up overdue activities. Here's an example of one overdue activity. If in a healthy DevOps culture, if that's your best practice and it's late, they need help. Our customers start shifting their release managers from gatekeepers, and they transition into coaches and mentors. And a little foreshadowing on additional steps, because there's more to release management than just managing the releases and scopes and governance and compliance. Additional phases would do things like bring in the test progress for each one of these releases, correlate it to the defect status, correlate it to the builds. Okay, so those are future steps, but don't feel compelled to bite off that whole onion. But start on the far left with the scope to tee yourself up. And just a few more outcomes now. Kind of very practical tools for the team to have. Heaven forbid, a real-time release schedule. So now that we're bringing all this data into Plutora, you can see all of your different releases or pipelines, on a unified schedule, lots of filtering as well. Hey, and this helps you manage schedule dependencies. Hey, I've got an emergency release. I'm sure it never happens. What else is happening at the same time that I, as a release manager, need to understand? I was just talking with a customer today, no releases for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden all the teams want to release on week 4. It's like you need visibility into this, to spread that out. I can view the data as a calendar view, a very practical, pragmatic tool, often used to schedule deployments. Because when you want to schedule deployments, you have to go, hey, here's today the 8th. There's an offshore holiday today. Can't do a release. This Friday is Veterans Day, but it's okay because I'm going to do my mobile banking release anyway. Here's that emergency release that's going to go out. So where's the white space? Got my blackout periods in here. We can bring in operations information to show that, hey, I got a DR test the first Wednesday of every month. I got to avoid that space. So a real practical tool to manage calendar dependencies. 3 more screens for you to demonstrate. Another one is as you scale up is can be interactions. Ideally everything's perfect microservices and API controlled, but that's not always the case. You might have a mix of teams, tools, and some old tools or some old platforms and newer ones. So what our system impact matrix does is it ingests, we know all of your releases down the left, all of your applications under management to deliver the services you deliver to your customers. And in the middle is the scope. Okay, the legend here is where there's code changes, regression dependencies, to keep it simple here. So I've got, for instance, a database project that's touching the client services application, doing a change request and a feature. Meanwhile, I have another team doing something different. They're changing the same app. They've got a defect fix and a feature. This is an application dependency that needs to be managed. And it's usually in the heads of a few, architects. We want transparency for the whole team. Now the release manager can even manage these dependencies, because if one of these projects slips, it could drag down the other project. And certainly looking for, QA teams will look for hotspots of activity. Got a lot of change to this authorization service. I better, do the full regression pass instead of just the light pass. And maybe I'll kind of close with this one. As you pass through, you understand your releases, your stories, you watch the stories all complete, the governance and compliance is done. I'm ready to release. Where's the evidence that you're ready? Is it a low risk to production? I see a lot of folks have a pretty traditional change advisory board process that we can almost basically totally automate. We've collected all the data from day one. There's no going back to some dev manager whose team wrote code 6 weeks ago. We know that. So, here I've got a change that's hit for this, BI engine. I know all of my, just refreshing here real quick. All of my governance and compliance activities have been finished. I know the applications that are changing, the stories that are being delivered, the deployment plan that's going to be used. And in future phases of your maturity, you can bring in test progress, test status, defect status. And so extracting a lot of pain and toil out of that final approval step to get out to production. So, my goal here was to show you how Plutora can help, uplift your release management practice. Start with, kind of integration on the far left to your releases and scope. Get your process down on your SDLC, and then manage it and improve it. And then the next phase, we'll work on together. So, Bob, maybe back to you. I think I'm going to turn off my screen share.
Right.
Yeah,
Very good, Rich. Excellent job. And once again, Rich was demonstrating this from our quick start instance, and that is going to be available in a couple weeks from our website for a free trial. Those of you that were fortunate enough to be on this webinar have a link in there to get a pre-sign up if you'd like to be notified the instant it's available. Mark, what did you think? Is that demonstration going to help us with some of these transformation checklist items?
Yeah, well, that's, I continue to be impressed with Plutora's platforms have been for a long time. It certainly, as a solution, explicitly addresses many of the, the transformation challenges that we talked about. The scope of data collection analysis across many value streams is pretty unique, and its ability to communicate measurements and release management policies efficiently solves a lot of the bottlenecks that many transformations run into. I know in my own experience as a release manager from time to time, trying to provide that proactive kind of style rather than just tallying up, the past and telling people what they didn't do. Without something like a Plutora capability, you're dealing with a myriad of spreadsheets and manual calculations and things. It's a nightmare. So I really appreciate the demo and Plutora's product in that regard. Yeah.
So we were going to we're doing this demo. So I'm sorry, this poll now. So what solutions would help overcome your release management challenges? I mean, maybe this is going to reflect the ones that we had, but a technology tool like this, laying over the whole thing. I mean, Mark, do you think the answers will be substantially different than before?
Probably not. I mean, I think a lot of the issues still get bogged down with people, but as I say, you can't just evolve these three dimensions in isolation. You have to evolve them in parallel. So I think really you need to address all three in a strategic manner, even though you may give higher priority to let's say people issues.
Yeah, it's really a people thing, isn't it? People and process. So here we go. Again, I think with a tool, the beauty of starting with something like what Rich was showing is that you can start with just like you were showing, just the ALM, the EAP, the Jira integration into the platform, and the amount of information you get right away is just incredible. Be able to show management and other teams the value of such a solution, and then that'll generate the momentum necessary to really drive the solution more broadly in your organization. And that's the thing that frustrates people the most.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, takeaways. We hope we've covered a number of things. There's just a couple minutes, and we want to get to the Amazon gift card. So we'll just real quickly. We really need release management transformations are important. Release managers are in the middle of the software delivery factory, and those that stall out, those transformations that stall out tend to not bring the release managers along. That's a problem. So you got to start with a strategic roadmap. You got to know where you're going. Got to have a vision and implement the changes incrementally to show value along the way and to keep people, processes, and technology in balance. That's key. Platforms like what Rich showed you, we have what's called a value stream management platform. But the key here is the release capability that's built inside of it to be able to provide release managers the support they need, the visibility, the connecting the dots across the tools and processes to keep everybody informed. And the data-driven aspect allows you to reassess every step of the way and understand if you're getting better, how you might improve, etc. So there you go. It's a couple minutes before the hour. We have a ebook you can download that covers a lot of this. Actually, covers quite a bit more. There's another offer, so feel free to go up there and grab that. Some real serious capabilities described there. And with that, Cody, why don't you pop on? We have a minute for the drawing.
Perfect, Bob. Sounds good. Thank you so much. And to Mark and Richard as well. Thank you all so much for joining us today and taking us through the demo. We do have those 4 gift cards to give away. So our winners are Matt C., Patricia G., Abir S., and Brandy P. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card, but if you don't happen to see that email, do check your spam folder. And I'll also remind everyone that this session was recorded, so maybe you had to join us late and you missed the beginning. You will receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand so that you can rewatch and share as you'd like. I would like to thank Plutora for sponsoring today's program, and to everyone who attended and participated with our polls today. We had some massive turnouts with our poll attendance today. Thank you all so much for engaging with us. We do just want to ask for 1 extra minute of your time for a survey that should pop up as soon as we close out. But otherwise, we do hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong Learning program. Have a great rest of your day. And Mark, Bob, Richard, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, everybody.